Dzień dobry Państwu. Witam Państwa serdecznie na podsumowaniu roku 2021 wyniki finansowe grupy Budimex.
and the financial results of Budimex Group. With me here I have Marcin Wykowski, board member, financial director of Budimex. Welcome.
Pan prezes Artur
Pielech, CEO of FB Service, and to my right, Jacek Lech, CEO of Mostostal Kraków. Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to start with a short clip that will allow you to get a better feel of our fond memories of 2021 in the entire Budimex Group.
Szanowni Państwo, to był bardzo dobry rok
Indeed,
dla całej
that was
grupy
a very
Budimex.
good year for our entire
Rok
group.
pełen zmian.
But it was
Rok
also a
pełen
year
wyzwań.
full of challenges
Rok,
and
gdzie weszliśmy
changes.
na nowe rynki
A year when
poza
we
granice
entered
Polski.
new markets outside
Rok,
of the
gdzie
borders of
nastąpiło,
Poland. It was also a year of organic growth and growth via acquisitions.
Też rok, w którym
However, it was also a year
naszym zamawiającym, że
when we were
potrafimy
able to
realizować
show
inwestycje
to
i oddawać
our
je przed czasem.
contracting authorities that
bardzo
we
dobrej
are
jakości.
able to perform
W pierwszej kolejności,
on
zgodnie z
time
naszą
or
agendą,
before
chciałbym,
deadlines
żebyśmy
up to the
omówili
highest standards of
dane
quality.
makroekonomiczne.
This is the agenda of my presentation, and first of all I would like to talk about the macroeconomic results. Marcin, over to you. A brief summary I will give you an outline of our macroeconomic environment from the perspective of a construction company. However, the world changed today in the morning, as we all know. I will focus on the indicators, on the forecasts related to GDP for 2022 and 2023, which mark a growth of over 4.5% and 4% in respectively 2022 and 2023. A significant growth of GDP in 2021 was the result of a rebound effect after the onset of the COVID pandemic, after a drop in 2020 of over 20%. Unfortunately, as we know, the inflation rate is pretty high. It results from a variety of assistance funds that were available during the COVID pandemic. Therefore, the results, as you can see, year-to-year arc there. It is assumed that 2022 will be a year of 7.5% of inflation rate. However, the first half of the year will probably be marked with significantly higher inflation rate. We hope that this will cool down in the years to follow. When it comes to building and construction output, we see a significant growth in 2021, 7.9%, which is a very good dynamics. So when it comes to the infrastructure part, it was over 10%. However, the general construction sector was also performing very good, 5%, which is a sign of significant dynamics in the construction sector. Moving on to the changes in the building and construction output in fixed prices, which takes into consideration inflation rate. As we know, inflation is starting to impact variable prices, but we also see a very positive dynamics, 3.4% year on year. The division, however, is not equal. We see a drop in the construction of buildings when it comes to specialized construction services. The growth is different. What you see in below are the margins divided into three main categories of companies employing 10 to 49 employees, 50 to 249, and over 250 employees. As we know, Budimex is in the last category. The smaller companies start to improve their profitability. Smaller companies employing up to 49 employees are experiencing a downturn. However, this will cool down. The situation will even out. That's how it should be. A general contractor has EBIT of around 5%, our subcontractors around 7 to 8%. In other words, the profitability rates of 2018 on the side of our subcontractors, almost 12%, was an anomaly, an extraordinary situation. Currently, the situation seems to be more stable. We see there's a balance between our subcontractors and the general contractors. To summarize 2021, I would like to highlight the following events on the construction market. The key achievement of ours with the contracting authorities was the issue of valorization of contracts. I would like to thank our contracting authorities, not only the road authority, but also the railroad infrastructure manager in Poland. We are still in dialogue. We've talked about collaboration, aiming to reach a situation which mitigates the risks for both parties. Until 2021, as you know, there was a limit of valorization on our contracts of 5%. Right now, the new tenders that have been announced since the beginning of January 2020 to have the valorization level of 8%, and it was announced that future tenders that shall be announced will have a 10% valorization cap. It will allow us also to mitigate the risks for both parties. As we know, valorization of contracts
is to the benefit of the contracting authority and the contractor as well. When the prices of materials go down or the prices of labor go down, we take that into account and give back the funds to the contracting authorities. This has been a third year in a row with very stable tendering process on the side of the Polish Road Authority. When it comes to the railroad segment, this was a tough year indeed. 2021 was a year of transition when it comes to EU funds. The number of railroad contracts was very limited. However, 2022 seems to be very promising. We will talk about it later in our presentation. What can easily be noticed is the fact that we are experiencing increasing pressure when it comes to prices of materials and availability of EU funds. EU funds indeed have an impact on our investments. However, we see truly ambitious plans in the energy sector. Furthermore, already now, first tenders have been announced related to the Solidarity Transport Hub, and we know how huge this investment will be. When it comes to the bottom right-hand corner of the presentation, announced tenders by the Polish Railroad Infrastructure Manager, you see that we have acquired a significant tender in 2021, 9 tenders with a value of 10.6 billion PLN. 2022 seems to be very promising. Already now we hear of 6 billion PLN, but the total amount will be over 10 billion PLN. Moving on to prices of selected materials, we know that this is a topic of interest not only to us but also to you. Globally on the market we see prices stabilizing. This stabilization applies to all kinds of material from concrete, reinforced steel, because these are the key areas where the prices are very impactful. Concrete manufacturers announced that they see a need for a price increase, but this will not be a dramatic price increase. We expect that to be a single-digit price increase, not a double-digit one. When it comes to reinforced steel, we have noticed that the prices have stabilized quarter to quarter. They even dropped by 11%. The prices of oil, however, and asphalt are concerning. As my colleague has mentioned, what happened today in the morning will definitely impact the prices of oil, and prices of oil have a direct impact on the prices of asphalt. So, as you see, up until now, those prices have been pretty stable. It has, however, been announced that the prices of asphalt will most likely go up. Currently, the prices of oil are going up as well. Let us look at our main contracting authorities on the Polish market. That is the Polish Road Authority and Railroad Infrastructure Manager. In terms of the first entity, the tendering process has been stable. In 2021, the value of tenders opened was over 13 billion PLN. When it comes to EU funds, as I've mentioned, we have closed the financing perspective 2014-2021. Time has come to summarize the 7-year program in the entity. This was a period of total value of investments exceeding 95 billion PLN. In terms of the Railroad Infrastructure Manager, this was almost 46 billion PLN. There was a significant drop in 2021, as said, but how does that translate into our results? When you take the longer perspective of 2014-2021, we reached a level of 19%. That was our share when it comes to the projects of the Polish Road Authority. Every 5th kilometer, you might say, was done by us. When it comes to railroads, the share was 18%, so I might say that the portfolio is very comparable. I'm always saying that the Railroad Infrastructure Manager is our youngest member of the family. We've been in the market for 6 years only, but we are already a market leader. We have almost 20% of share of the market. Now, moving on to the second item on their agenda, I would like to present to you the financial results of Budimex Group. We'll focus on key results of the company, excluding Budimex Nieruchomości. We've announced that in May Budimex Nieruchomości was divested. That's why the revenue and the results of that company are not included in our portfolio. As said, this will be a summary of 2021 for the group without Budimex Nieruchomości. We will also provide you an overview of 2022. When we compare the revenue, we see that they are on a comparable level to 2020. However, we've gone up by 2.6%, which is a great success. Q1 of 2021 was a tough period for us. As you know, this was a period of very bad weather conditions. We were not able to continue our works. In Q1, we had problems when it comes to lengthiness of permitting processes, which was a result of the pandemic. However, in the 3 remaining quarters, we were able to catch up. In Q4, we've exceeded the results of 2020. The gross margin from 700 million went up to 833 million, which is a growth of over 18%. Right now, that's the 10.5% of profitability. Moving on to EBIT, we've gone up by 31% to 7.4 profitability, and net profit almost 50% up to the level of 5.7%. Moving on to individual segments, in particular the services and construction segment, we can easily notice that the first 2 quarters of 2021 were a tough period for us because of weather conditions and lengthiness of permitting processes. Q4, however, allowed us to catch it up. Which had a very positive impact on our result, and final result was, as you can see it here, the service segment is an area where we would like to develop. My colleague will tell you more about this particular area. We've experienced a very significant growth, over 27% improvement in revenue compared to 2020. Our objective is 1 billion in 2026, and I deeply believe that we will be able to achieve it much more quickly than that. Already after 2021, we can see that FB service reached almost 800 million zlotys in sales. When it comes to gross margin by segment, individual quarters show us that it has been pretty stable. It is not fluctuating, both in the construction segment as well as in the service segment. The margins are stable. At the end of 2021, in the construction segment, this was over 8.8%, which is over 643 PLN. In the service sector, 140 million PLN, and profitability level on a similar level, 17.9%, so which is still comparable to 2020. Another important thing when it comes to margins and the rebound effect is the completion of some contracts that were difficult indeed. These were difficult long-term contracts. I specifically mean the Turów power plant, which was a 6-year contract, so without valorization option. The incineration contract was another contract that did not include valorization. This was a heavy burden for us when it comes to margins. Moving on to our cash position, that's also similar to 2020, 2.6 billion, which is a high cash position. Vis-a-vis 2020, that's the difference is mostly the dividend paid out in 2020. With the current interest rates, this shall improve our result, but also give us better certainty as for the opportunities for growth via organic growth and via acquisition of companies in various segments.
Now, the history of dividend payouts is the 13th year in a row that a dividend has been paid out, 138 zloty per share, so it's over 3.3 billion zloty of dividends paid out. 2021 was a historical year for us. It was over 800 million zloty. So over 31 zloty per share. And now the book order at the end of 2021, we also had a record order book over 13 billion zloty. And you can see that it's very diversified. We have contracts in the road and hydraulic engineering. It's over 5.8 billion. You cannot see the difference between road contracts and hydraulic contracts. However, we have also a very significant volume of hydraulic contracts. Here you can see it all attributed to one division. Now, railways and general construction with over 13 billion, and industrial over 13. And you can see it's really diverse and gives us some certainty, and we can believe that we will develop in a stable way. So, and it's also about contracts across Poland, Suwałki, Turów, Szczecin, so all over Poland. We are present in every city, in every town in Poland, and in all the different sectors. Now the contracts signed 2021, we can see a result of 7 billion, which is a little bit less than expected, but there is a good reason behind that. It was the end of the EU perspective 2014-2021, so we expected this year to be difficult, and we expected that there would be fewer tenders, and that's why in 2020 we focused on submitting bids, and we acquired 9 billion zloty. In 2021, we won tenders, well, with over 2 billion zloty. You can see it here. However, that contract was not signed. Why? The tender procedure was quite lengthy because there were some protests and some issues had to be clarified, and that's why the contract has not been concluded yet. But we are quite sure that this contract will be concluded in 2021. Well, this will be attributed to 2022, but the bid was submitted in 2021. 7 billion, it's also very diversified. So we followed the market trend. Over 3 billion, this is the General Road Authority. Then the railway sector, and you can also see the hydraulic segment here. And then Regalica Szczecin, it is a contract, a joint contract of the railway sector and the water management sector. And you can see also the construction sector with over 500 million. So in general, you can see that our company, the Budimex Group, has works to be completed until 2023. So our shareholders, our employees, and also ourselves, we can all be sure that our order book will be full until 2023. So we've already secured contracts to be implemented until 2023. So some summaries following our last meeting after Q3. We told you at that time that we would start our activities outside Poland, in the neighboring countries, and now we expect us to provide you with information what has happened within these 6 months. Of course, 6 months, this is not a long time, and we have a long-term perspective here, not a short-term perspective. However, let me summarize where we stand after these 6 months. So we launched new companies on the German, on the Czech, and the Slovakian markets, and that was a key element so that we could start submitting bids. On the German market, we've already won the first tender. It's not a lot of money, but our bid was the best one. However, there were a lot of questions asked because it was the first contract on the German market, so there was a lot of discussion with the contracting authority. It's a small value, but we wanted to start with something that would be less risky. It is some bridge reconstruction works. Then the Czech market, we submitted a bid of over 2 billion zloty. And just like in Poland, the Czech market worked in a very similar way in 2021 because the financial perspective of the EU was over and the new one started. So there weren't many tenders, and we were not aggressive with our bids. We have a very stable order book, so we do not want to acquire new contracts without securing our margin on those contracts. Now, Slovakia, we submitted our bids there too, and we want to stress that we are trying to acquire the Rail Baltica contract. It's a huge contract to connect Poland with Lithuania and Estonia, so we focus on that contract. It's about over 8 billion euros, and we have consortia with regard to that contract, and we take a long-term perspective here because it is a contract that will be implemented over a period of 8 years, and this will diversify our activities in the Polish market. During our last meeting, we told you that our company was not just about construction. We are trying to enter the green energy market too, and we told you that we would focus on this after the first half of the year. And now I'd like to tell you what's happened since that time, and Marcin will take over now. So Marcin, voice over to you. Yeah, so we told you that we would enter the green energy market, and we are working on a complex strategy to find our place on the energy market, on the energy transformation market here. So we acquired a wind park. It's not ready yet. It's about to be built. And we need capex in the value of 55 million zlotys. So this is just the first step. It's a wind park, 7 megawatt, 3.5 twice, and the mean wind speed is 7 meters per second. So it's 25 gigawatts per year. We also have a contract, a PPA contract with a reliable partner. So we want to finance this investment via project finance. So we hope that this will be financed from external sources in the amount of 75%, and our own contribution will be 25%. We have other projects underway as well. This is about photovoltaics and wind energy. So we hope that in the next half year, or at least in 2022, we'll be able to boast new investments in this area. Thank you. Thank you, Marcin. And now item number 3, so the discussion of the financial results of FB Service and Mostostal Kraków. Artur, voice over to you. Hello, welcome everyone. So these are the results of FB service. Mr. Popko has given you a lot of information and I will provide some more details. So you can see increasing values year over year. So the last year was a very successful one. We increased our revenues by 28%. Artur has already told you this. We also had an increase in EBIT and EBITDA, in particular as regards the percentage. So you can see both values which have been adjusted, but still it is a very high level. So we have EBIT at 10.7% and EBITDA at 16.8%. There were investments carried out last year regarding projects which are going to have serious impact on our results within a few years, because these being greenfield projects, so waste management. However, we were also interested last year in issues such as the acquisition of new companies. And I'm going to give you some more information on this soon. It's also quite important for you to understand that our core business is waste management, and last year it made for some 70% of our revenues and almost 100% of profit of that company. So the strategy that we presented to the management board and the supervisory board predicted development across the whole waste value chain. However, we did not include dangerous waste. So we focus on municipal waste, the waste collection. We've been present there around Wrocław, Poznań, Łódź and Rzeszów, and in the Mazovian region, and also the pre-processing segment. We already have 4 plants, mechanical and biological processing plants. Also the alternative fuel plants, RDF. We have a plant in Kamieńsk with over 80,000 tons per year. We also have a biogasification plant and materials recovery plants. And these plants are going to process waste which have been collected selectively. These are plants which we are going to build. There are not many such plants in Poland, so I think this will be greenfield investments on plots of land that we already have or such that we are going to acquire. And the next stage will be the processing of waste, the target processing. We have landfills, and also we might get involved in some incineration projects. And Budimex informed yesterday that we've signed a letter of intent with Inowrocław, and Czech is our partner there, with regard to the development of a very big installation for over 300,000 tons in Inowrocław, in the town of Inowrocław. So we are interested in that project. You can see it clearly, and we've been working on this for 2 years now. And we've got very specific projects underway, and the future of that business, that means recycling. So we want waste not to be waste anymore. We want it to be processed into a new product. And we want to be present in the composting segment. So this is about green waste, and also in glass recycling. In the glass recycling segment, and we want to have our own plant there, and we also want to be active in the plastics recycling segment. And now it's the first time that we are going to give you such information. We've got some greenfield projects. However, we are also continuing acquisitions of already existing plants, and last Friday we concluded a preliminary agreement regarding the acquisition of a waste management plant, and It's a new region of Poland for us. It is a company that is working in the biological stabilization segment, and they also have an RDF fuel plant. So it matches our strategy 100%. It has revenues of over 30 million zlotys per year and high profitability, which is typical of that sector. It's a preliminary agreement. There are some conditions precedent, and once these are fulfilled, we'll be able to do the closing probably in the second quarter of this year. So stay tuned. And before my colleague takes over, I would like to give you some more information. In June, maybe July, we'll give you information on the road and buildings maintenance segment and our activities there, and also lighting modernization. And as Mr. Popko and Mr. Zwanisławski were saying, we have investments in renewable energies. However, we might also consider entering the electromobility sector. As Budimex, we'd like to participate in that revolution that is now taking place. And within the next decades, our mobility patterns are going to change completely. We'll be using different vehicles. So we can actually expect a lot to happen this year in this sector, and we'll keep you updated. Now voice over to my colleagues. Artur, thank you. And now Mostostal Kraków, Jacek Lech, the President of the Management Board. Welcome, everyone. A few words on Mostostal Kraków. 2021 was a very difficult year for our company. There was some high pressure on our costs. Steel purchases, as Mr. Popko was saying, the steel prices increased by almost 100% last year, and we used some 25,000 tons of steel every year. So throughout the year, we are focused on doing whatever was possible to decrease the impact on these increasing prices on the company's activities. So even though the macroeconomic conditions were difficult, our results are very good. And this is our belief and the belief of our owner. We have revenues of 323 million zlotys, which is a record result. Even though the steel prices were increasing, our EBIT was very decent, 4.2%, which resulted in a profit of 14 million zlotys. So we are very optimistic as regards the future. Last year, we concluded contracts of over 407 million zlotys, so it's also a record result for us. So just like Budimex, we also have submitted some bids which had offered the best prices, so we hope to conclude these contracts in the first quarter, which means that we have a very secure order book at the end of 2021, when it was 451 million, and it was also a record result. So these being the figures, and now some information on what happened at our company in December last year. We suggested a new strategy, which was discussed with the management board of Budimex, and it was adopted. So in 2022, 23 and 24, we want to focus on organic development in different directions. We have defined 5 directions where we want to develop. We want to increase the scale of our operations on the domestic market, and we found some areas which we want to enter. We want to increase our product portfolio. That's why we concluded a number of contracts with our technological partners, like Hyundai, for example, on the Polish market. And I hope that in the future, this will result in projects that we are going to implement together. And we also have strategic partnership with Westinghouse, and we hope to implement an atomic project together, a nuclear project together. Another area is the energy transformation segment. So Mostostal has participated in the construction of all the coal plants in Poland, energy plants. Such plants are not going to be constructed anymore. So now we want to participate in the construction of different plants fueled with gas, for example, or green energy. And we also want to construct incinerators. We are building 3 of them now, 2 in Poland and 1 in Germany. Another area of our activities would be the industry. We want to develop our services there. We want to focus on 3 markets: cement, refinery, and steel. So we want to offer more complex services. That's the expectation of our clients, and we want to offer this in the years to come to meet the expectations of our customers. Now, the foreign markets, Mr. Popko was saying that we wanted to enter the neighboring markets, and Mostostal, well, some 40 to 50% of our production is the production that we export almost to all the continents, including South America. So we want to develop there. We want to assemble steel structures in the neighboring countries. We've concluded the first contracts, like the incinerator in Germany. The contract was concluded last year. Another direction, this would be increasing our production potential. We have 2 manufacturing plants in Kleszczów and in Kraków. We want to invest in a machinery park to increase our manufacturing potential, and also we want to increase that potential while increasing our production effectiveness, so that we can increase the manufacturing potential of Mostostal in an organic way. However, we are following what's going on the market, and if there is a possibility of acquiring a new company that is a structured producer, we want to use that opportunity. So this would be our strategy for 2022 to 2024. We want to increase our product portfolio. We want more diversification. So we hope to have a more diversified structure of revenues. Right now, we are a leader when it comes to assembling the steel structures. We want to be a leader in the future as well. We've set also a goal for revenues. So the strategy says that there will be an increase to over 500 million, and we hope to achieve that goal in 2024. It might be possible to reach that level next year already. Our activities on the foreign markets, we want to intensify our works on the German market when it comes to supplies and assemblies of steel structures. However, we want to follow our owner as well. So if there are plans that need steel structures, we submit bids together with Budimex. Our strategy includes also decreasing the carbon footprint. So we have investments in our own energy sources. We invested in photovoltaics, and already now 20% of energy that we use is energy from our own sources, and we want to develop there even more in the future.
Thank you, Jacek. The last item on our agenda, set for Q&A, are the perspectives and the forecasts for the market, i.e. the period of the upcoming years. I will, however, focus on 2022 and the nearest future, in the light of the plans of our main contracting authorities. I will start with the Polish Road Authority. They have a tremendous investment program until 2023. 100 billion is in progress, to be continued by another 186 billion planned as new projects. Altogether, that's over 290 billion, which is a significant amount of money that gives us a certain level of stability. You saw that 30% of our portfolio comes from that contracting authority. Hence, we have a stable position. We can invest in equipment, in people.
I zapowiedzi na rok 2022 to jest ponad 22 miliardy.
With over 22 billion forecasted for 2022, as you have shown to you, our effectiveness rate in this segment is around 20%, so we feel stable. I mentioned that for a reason. We've already talked about EU funds and a certain fluctuation, if you like, when it comes to disbursement of these funds for Poland. On the right-hand side, in the pie chart, you see that 86% of the budget in the investments of the Polish Road Authority stem from the Polish budget. So we feel pretty at ease. 86% is going to come from the budget of Poland, i.e. it's going to be independent on EU funds. When it comes to the Polish Railroad Infrastructure Manager, the railroad development program is in its last mile. It's practically completed. The yellow part of the chart are contracts that have already been completed. Almost completed, i.e. in the last phase, 20%, the blue part, are the ones that have already been completed. We also have high hopes when it comes to the Railroad Infrastructure Manager, our second greatest contracting authority. You see that the company plans to spend 15 billion in 2022, 14 billion in 2023, and the contracting level for the years to come is around 12 billion PLN. The company has announced tenders for almost 10 billion PLN, and we are right now working on preparing the bids. Now let me move on to the topic of EU funds. On the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, I'm sorry, you see the former operating program Infrastructure and Environment, which currently has the name Phoenix, which stands for European Funds for Infrastructure, Climate and Environment. You see that the level is very similar to the previous financial perspective, 2014-2020. Right now, we are on the level of 15 billion PLN. On the right-hand side, you see the Connecting Europe facility, i.e. the funds that are allocated for the entire European Union. The basis for their disbursement are calls for projects. New tenders announced by the Polish Railroad Infrastructure Manager will mostly be financed from the Connecting Europe facility. We hope that there will be no suspension. We are all going in the direction of green energy. We want to reduce our CO2 emissions, and we shall invest heavily in developing railroad, being the green railway being the green transportation method.
However, we cannot forget about the hydro-technical market. We also have the leader position in this field, mostly focusing on the port investments. Back in 2019, our Polish government adopted the Port Infrastructure Development Program to 2030. The value of port investments may reach 20 to 25 billion PLN. On top of that, we shall have a port that will serve to develop our offshore wind farms. This huge investment will be implemented in the coming future, as this will be our gate to developing offshore wind farms. On top of that, we have inland investments mostly related to inland waterways. In this field, we are already present, not only when it comes to this section connecting Elbląg and the sea, but also we have the Vistula Spit, but we also have 4 contracts on the Oder River between Szczecin and Kostrzyn to regulate the bed of the River Oder, to make it fit for transportation. The hydrotechnical market is very promising, and it also fits into Fit for 35. We will be willing to bring down our CO2 emissions levels. Another item that is not less important is the construction of the Solidarity Transport Hub, STH. The activity levels are really high. Investors are currently opening tender procedures and entering the permitting process to start the construction as soon as possible. Noteworthy, the first tenders have already been opened. They relate to preparatory work. We participated in a tender. Out of 19 companies, 8 were shortlisted. We are on the short list. Right now, we shall enter the verification process, but I deeply believe that we will participate in this huge investment, noteworthy. The airport part only is 30 to 35 billion PLN. The railroad part is 100 billion, which will be high-speed rail, and 25 billion for roads. So indeed, that is a huge investment that will also be our path to development. And now let me touch upon our new kid on the block, our latest kid. You know the company, you know that we cannot rest on our laurels. We look for diversification continuously. We look for opportunities of growth, of entering new segments. That's why we have started Budimex Startup Challenge, and now let me turn to Rafał to tell us something more about it. We'll also present you a brief clip about Budimex Startup Challenge, which will show you, to give you more information about our initiative. So now the clip.
Za nami pierwsza edycja Budimex Startup Challenge. Mieliśmy poddanych ocenie 10 kandydatów do zwycięstwa. W ostateczności okazało się, że firmy, które nagrodziliśmy lub wyróżniliśmy, odpowiadają na podstawowe potrzeby grupy.
Serdecznie gratuluję zwycięzcom. Niech to będzie początek naszej wspólnej drogi do realizacji celów, które postawiliśmy przed sobą, czyli poprawa efektywności energetycznej, poprawa bezpieczeństwa oraz gospodarowania odpadami w sposób odpowiedzialny społecznie.
Z punktu widzenia grupy cele biznesowe zorganizowania całego tego konkursu zostały w 100% wypełnione. Mamy nadzieję, że na początku roku uda nam się z tymi wszystkimi 5 nagrodzonymi firmami spotkać i będziemy chcieli rozmawiać o bardzo konkretnych już inwestycyjnych projektach wspólnych, tak żebyśmy mogli też wspomóc już konkretnie rozwój tych firm.
Naszym celem jest niwelowanie wypadków i sprawienie, żeby miejsca pracy były bezpieczniejsze. I to, co chcemy osiągnąć, to skalować sprzedaż, szukać coraz więcej case'ów wdrożeniowych i rozwijać naszą sztuczną inteligencję i naszą wizję maszynową o nowe funkcjonalności i możliwości.
Konkurs jest dla nas ciekawą szansą wejścia do kolejnej branży. Do tej pory jesteśmy sprawdzeni w 2 dużych przedsięwzięciach z firmami z różnych przemysłów. Teraz wchodzimy w budownictwo. Myślimy, że po tej wygranej przejdziemy do rozmów o testowaniu naszych produktów w projektach Budimexu.
Nagroda w konkursie dla nas przede wszystkim szansa na współpracę z tak dużym partnerem jak Budimex oraz szansa na promocję naszego rozwiązania na świecie.
Jako The Heart na co dzień wspieramy korporacje w budowaniu nowych przedsięwzięć biznesowych oraz wdrażaniu innowacji pochodzących od młodych spółek technologicznych. Cieszymy się, że mieliśmy być okazję partnerem merytorycznym pierwszej edycji Budimex Startup Challenge.
Budimex Startup Challenge is the last item on our agenda. Let me just briefly remind you that Budimex has a tradition of developing startups. FB Service I represent was a startup. We developed it from ground up. My colleague to my right is one of the founding fathers. He's been in the supervisory board from the very beginning. And indeed, that's the explanation of our strong interest in startups. Why did we embark on that? First of all, we want to use the good energy and creativity of startups to develop our main area of activity. Startups that were qualified for the finals, i.e. the 10 companies that we saw, were actually companies that were good to go, ones that we could immediately use in the development of our key segments, i.e. construction or services. The winner was Serali. As you may have guessed, it is related to surveillance, but surveillance for a good purpose. The company uses modern technology and CCTV to assist in surveillance and exclusion of a hazardous situation that might lead to an accident. Why did we choose this company? For us, as a group, OHS, safety and construction sites are absolutely crucial, and for us, the technology offered by the said startup could help us to tackle the challenges in this field even better. Number 2 was Sandoil, a company that offers innovative technology for recycling of tires and recovery of soot. This fits perfectly into our waste management strategy. That's why we would like to embark on cooperation with that company. Number 3 was Resolution, dealing with building energy management systems. And on top we had 2 other companies, Born Electric, a company that develops energy storage technologies. Being awarded the distinction, Born Electric is offering a solution that is a key to the future. And the second distinction went to Optimo Light, offering very modern light fixtures for buildings, which are not only energy saving, but are also able to create heat maps. And depending on the intensity of use of surfaces, manage or utilities, not only lighting, but also air conditioning and ventilation. We are right now thinking on how to invest our attention and our resources into these companies and how to scale up their business, how to add value through cooperating with them to our
core business. We will keep you updated when it comes to these 5 startups. And as my colleague said, Budimex Startup Challenge is here to stay. We will continue it in the future. Thank you very much, Artur. As you see, ladies and gentlemen, that's not only a PR gimmick. Startup Challenge is not only showing to the world that we want to work with startups. No, we seriously focus on companies that we can develop, but we also want to diversify through investing in these companies. We look for companies that would allow us to achieve synergies and the opportunity to quickly scale up our business and the business of the new startups. Let me offer you a brief summary of 2021. As I mentioned at the beginning, this was a very good year for Budimex Group, not only in terms of the results, but also achieving our objectives. I can proudly say that we have exceeded our objectives, we've exceeded our goals, we did much more than we planned in our strategy. We went outside Poland, so we delivered on our promises. However, it was also a year full of challenges. There were many challenges related to people, to prices of materials, to contracts in general.
Udało nam się, czy też nie do końca zawsze robimy w firmie słowo udało się, bo to
we are not particularly fond of saying that we made it, but we invested in organic growth, we invested in acquiring other companies, we concluded important agreements that will have an impact on our future. I mean agreements with the key players in the construction sector and in the energy sector. We've concluded a historical agreement with Hyundai. As you heard, Hyundai is one of the main contractors for Orlen and the Police plant. We are working there not only as Budimex, but also FB Service and Mostostal Kraków. Furthermore, we concluded agreements related to future nuclear power plants, and we've set up a consortium for contracts that will be announced outside of the borders of Poland. I think that summarizes what we wanted to present to you today. Thank you very much for this part of our meeting, and now I would like to open the Q&A session. We will try to answer all questions asked, everything that we receive from you. If we don't have enough time to do so, I declare that if there are any open questions that you send to us, we will reply to you in writing individually. Thank you very much indeed. Welcome, my name is Michał Wrzosek. I'm the spokesperson of Budimex and I'll be the moderator of the Q&A session. We will be answering the questions in the order of their appearance. If questions are repeated, we will try to group them together. We have plenty of time for our Q&A session, and I do encourage you not to hesitate with your questions. So let me start with a question from Adam Roguski, Gazeta Giełdy Parkiet. The operating margin in Q4 is 9% in the construction sector. Where does this result come from? Martin, would you like to take that question? Well, I will not be focusing on the actual figure, but I'll say that in the construction segment, the result was improved for a couple of reasons. First of all, we completed very difficult long-term contracts that were indeed a burden for our margins in the previous years. What I mean is specifically the Turów power plant, the incineration in Ilno, and a number of contracts from previous years where we didn't include valorization in our contracts, and the prices of materials had a grave impact on on the performance of the contracts. The second element that also improved our margin were the fact that wherever we were able to hedge the prices for materials or signed long-term contracts for them, we did so, which improved the profitability of the entire group. And FB Service, however, is an important player in that context. They improved their sales by over 30%, keeping the same very good level of profitability on the level of 18%. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo. Następne pytanie.
Thank you. Next question.
Pan Marcin Świder,
BNP Paribas.
Moglibyśmy prosić o odniesienie się do wzrostu poziomu rezerw
touch upon the increase of the provisions for losses on construction contracts during 2021 from 310 in 2020 to 560 million at the end of September 2021.
Czy tworzone rezerwy oznaczają wysokość potencjalnych strat na
a sign of potential losses on the contracts currently performed, or perhaps they are created taking into account the potential profitability level of such contracts? Do these provisions take into consideration the revalorization of contracts, and for how many contracts do we have the provisions for how many contracts at a risk of loss? Well, when it comes to construction sectors, all the difficulties are bygones now. The provisions that we have in our balance sheet refer to the budgets of our contracts as a whole. During the life cycle of a contract, the margin fluctuates. It is our duty, however, to show profitability of individual contracts as if it was relatively permanent value throughout the year, i.e. we want to avoid situations in which in one year the margin is pretty high and there's a loss in the ensuing year. We try to flatten it out. Therefore, we try to rationalize the margin to level it out. But we also look responsibly at our contracts. We are trying to show the margins to be on the safe side, so we try to take into account the price increase of construction materials. You know, the inflation rate is pretty high right now. We also try to account for risks that have not yet materialized on the market when creating provisions. With all that in view, our backlog is safe right now in Budimex, and we assume that if the inflation rate doesn't go up to 7.5%, but will only decrease, this will mean better profitability of our contracts, and perhaps some of these provisions will be released if these risks do not materialize. Thank you. Sara Borys, Polish press agency. The group improved its profitability in 2021 from 5.5 to 7%. What are the objectives and possibilities when it comes to profitability in 2022? Do you see potential for further improvement? Well, the profitability levels are good. This is also visible in the data of Statistics Poland for other companies, so I wouldn't like to speak about the entire 2022. Right now, we revise every single contract every year, and everything will depend on the situation on the market. However, we will be trying to have a similar profitability level in 2022, similar to the one that we had in 2021. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much.
Pytanie od pana Krzysztofa
PADO.
Kiedy spodziewają się Państwo
When
wyboru
are you
wykonawców
expecting
na
to select
ogłoszonych
contractors
w pierwszym kwartale
for
2022 przetargach PKP PLK?
tenders of the Polish
Jak będzie
Railroad
wyglądać
Infrastructure
konkurencja,
Manager announced in
na tych
Q1
największych
2022? What
przetargach,
will your
powyżej 1 miliarda
competitors be in the biggest tenders,
w
i.e.
przetargach
over
PKP
1
PLK
billion
w
PLN for the
najbliższym
same
czasie?
contracting
Czy
authority?
będą to
And
3-4 oferty, czy
do you
spodziewamy
think
się
that these
raczej
will be 3-4 bids or more?
Z uwagi na ograniczoną
Well,
ilość przetargów
because
w roku
of the limited number of
2021
tenders in
uważam, że
2021,
będzie
I
bardzo duża
think that
konkurencja
the
na
competition will be
postępowaniach
very high when it
przetargowych
comes to
PKP
tenders
PLK.
of the Polish Railroad
Co do
Infrastructure
wyboru,
Manager.
terminu wyboru,
As
ciężko mi jest to doprecyzować, bo
for
część z kontraktów,
the
tak jak pan redaktor tam
deadlines, it's
zauważył,
hard to say, as
jest
you
bardzo
rightly
dużej
pointed
wartości, a
out,
więc
some of
pojawia
the
się wiele
tenders
pytań
are of high value,
zapytań do
therefore there are
postępowań
many
przetargowych.
questions
To trochę
related to
wydłuża,
the tendering process
procedurę
and the
przetargową,
procedure
więc ja myślę,
itself, which
spodziewałbym się podpisania tych
makes it
kontraktów w drugiej
lengthier.
połowie
I would
tego roku.
expect that the contracts will be signed in the second half of 2022. As for the number of competitors, I think that this number will be high. The expectations of the sector are really high. There are many players on the market as well. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję. Pan
Thank
Krzysztof
you.
Pado tutaj jeszcze dopytał.
Mr. Pado asked another question.
Pytanie o asfalt. Jaki jest procent
Asphalt.
przewidywanego
What is the
wykorzystania
percentage
Jaki procent
of
obecnie
what's the
przewidywanego
share
asfaltu do wykorzystania jest zabezpieczony?
of
Jaka jest
asphalt
polityka hedgingowa w
that
zakresie
you have
asfaltu?
secured
Czy
vis-a-vis
spółka
your
zabezpiecza
demand?
cenę
What's your
asfaltu pod
hedging
konkretne
policy?
kontrakty, czy raczej
Do you
jednak pod
hedge
cały
asphalt for individual
portfel?
contracts or for their entire portfolio? Well, we try to hedge asphalt prices for specific contracts.
Z roku na rok jest to poziom
Year to year, that's
70
between 70 to 80%,
75%.
usually around 75%.
Z uwagi na to, że nie zabezpieczamy 100%
We do
wartości
not
asfaltu,
hedge
bo
100% of the demanded asphalt because
jesteśmy z grupą
we
Orlen czy też Lotos kwartalnie.
settle with Orlen or Lotos on quarterly basis, and we don't, if we don't pick up the ordered asphalt in a given quarter, we have to pay high penalties.
Jako spółki budowlane jesteśmy
As a construction company, we are highly dependent on the weather conditions. In the past, there were periods of heavy rain and bad weather, during which we were not able to pick up certain quantities of asphalt. As a result, we had to pay penalties. This level of 75% is a safe buffer for us. The remaining 25% is dependent on the weather conditions. However, 75% is a level that ensures stability financially. We are secured against potential price increase of asphalt. Thank you very much. Tomasz Haberko, ISB News.
Dwa pytania.
Two questions. Question number one. At the end of 2022, what could be your order book like when it comes to foreign contracts? And question number two, which has already been answered in part, what's your assessment of the last tenders by the Polish railway company? Can the market relax now or not? And what could the contracting look like in 2022, year over year, when we assume that the pandemic is over and there will be new funds for railway investments available? So the tenders announced by PKP PLK, it is a high value. However, the expectations of the sector are even higher, and also our capabilities are even bigger. So if there is a chance that there will be more tenders, I think we would be able to submit our bids, and this would be beneficial for the construction market in Poland. However, this value is very high anyway, 10 billion PLN. And now our expectations when it comes to foreign contracts, I think that 2022 will not be the year in which we can see a high value there. As already mentioned, we keep looking at diversification and this segment in a long-term perspective. We do not have a short-term approach here. We want to be very cautious when entering these markets, and this will also depend on our competition and the price pressure on the other markets. We've submitted over 10 bids in the Czech Republic, and we can see that the pressure on prices is very high there, and we do not want to participate in this price war. So we are somewhere in between place number 2 and place number 3. However, you need to submit the best bid to stand a chance to conclude a contract, so it's not that easy. I would not expect this year to show some large contracts concluded on our side. We want to learn for now, so that we are ready in the years to come. And the value of our portfolio at the end of 2022, of course, we want to keep growing. We want the company to develop. This is our goal. I think it will not be less than 2021, and we'll do everything that is possible to increase that order book, that portfolio. Thank you. The next question, Elżbieta Pałysz. The infrastructure market. What will be the role of road maintenance in the results of FB service? What does it look like as compared to last year? Could you give us more information on the plans regarding electromobility? And are you also interested in hydrogen technologies? It's a good question. So as far as profitability is concerned, and this non-waste segment in 2021, we had revenues of some 220 million out of 870, and the final result, well, the EBIT was negative, and significantly so. I do not remember the exact figure. However, based on the lighting contracts along the south of Poland, we had provisions for 19 million in Q4. Now the costs of guarantees and completing these works in the next year, the following year. So the general impact was negative in 2021. And you can see this when you look at the results of Q4. And Q4 was not as good as quarters 1 to 3. And now the road maintenance, the result here was minus 8 or 9 million PLN. So there was a negative contribution too to the overall result, and this was because of the winter weather conditions in the first quarter. And now to answer your question, what's going to happen this year? This year the situation will be different. Why? First, the road business, well, its profitability in Q1, which is going to be over now in March, well, it's much higher than what we had in 2021. So we didn't have these severe weather conditions. And also the road maintenance now include contracts where we are paid for our interventions in the winter according to the weather conditions. Last year we had contracts where the risk of severe weather conditions was on our side, not on the side of the contractor. Of our contractor. Now in Pomerania we already have a contract that has a different formula. It's a contract with the Polish Road Authority, and in Pomerania we always had the highest losses, and this year we have managed to make a profit there during this winter time, and we submitted more bids in other tenders based on this formula of risk sharing as well. So I would expect a positive trend here, because we no longer have these flat rate contracts. Now the lighting. We had a negative profit last year when it comes to these contracts. However, these contracts are not going to affect our results this year. And building maintenance, well, that has always been profitable, and it is profitable this year too. So I expect the profitability to be high in the waste business, and I also expect the contribution of the non-waste business to be much better as compared to 2021. So altogether, I would say that the results of FB service will be even better than in 2021. And the mobility, yeah, you're right. So as regards the mobility, we need to take it easy, we need to wait, because it's a very complex topic. So we need to make decisions as to our further development, but we might still go in very different directions. So please understand that I will not be able to answer this question until Q3 of 2022. Right now we are investing in renewables. Is it part of the alternative mobility? No, it is not. However, you can already see that we are focused on that direction. So in the second half of 2022 we'll be able to provide you with more details. Marcin Darengowski. Could you please give us some more comments on the gross sales margin in the service sector in Q4 2021? Is it something that is going to last in the upcoming quarters? I think I've already answered this question. Should you require some more details, please ask your question again and we'll be happy to provide you with more information. David Sharma. What contracting trends, I mean Budimex now, and the management board, the railway sector, could you increase your position in the incubator sector? What kind of contracting do you expect this year in billion PLN? Well, I cannot give you a specific figure. However, 2022 will be very similar to what we had in 2021 in terms of contracting. Why? There is high pressure on prices from our competition. 2021 was very difficult in the construction sector, and we had a record value of 9 billion because we had this knowledge and we do not want to fight this price war. So we have a very selective approach when it comes to tenders announced on the market. We want to be very responsible there. So I would expect this to be a range between 7 and 9 billion PLN. Thank you. Another question, Elżbieta Paulus, the infrastructure market. Do you expect any impact on the labor market and the contracts resulting from the situation in Ukraine? So is there a serious risk of people leaving Poland for Ukraine because of the drafting there, or maybe it will be the opposite, so there will be many people coming from Ukraine to Poland? It's a very difficult question. This situation is very difficult, it's very dynamic. So right now, today, I do not want to say anything about this. I do not want to take a clear position on this. I think there will be impact on the labor market in Poland. However, we will be able to tell you what impact this will be exactly when we meet again. But there will be some significant impact in the coming months, and both scenarios are possible. We could have more people from Ukraine or fewer. Ms. Kapczyńska, Puls Biznesu. We've got increasing fuel prices. There is also a risk of the asphalt prices increasing because of the conflict in Ukraine. Does this mean that we need more provisions for losses? As already mentioned before, when it comes to asphalt, we are hedged to 75%, and we have a 3-year perspective here, so for 3 years in advance. When it comes to oil prices, well, the government has taken some good activities here, so we have valorization clauses in our contracts. So to a large extent, the risk has been reduced here when it comes to oil prices in our contracts. And we have also some significant added value because the tenders which are going to be announced now will have a valorization cap of 10%, which will allow us to cover losses resulting from the oil prices increasing worldwide. However, just look what's happening today. Well, based on what happens in the months to come, we'll be able to assess whether this 10% cap will be enough, because we are very happy with 5%, and we thought that 5% would be enough. However, these two factors, extraordinary factors, I mean the inflation, which has reached 10% now, almost 10%, and all the costs related to labor and the increasing prices of materials. Well, all this has led to a situation in which a 5% cap is just not enough for our contracts. Now this has been increased to 10%. I hope that 10% will be enough to compensate for the increasing prices. However, we'll see in 3 months. So during our next meeting, we'll be able to discuss this again. Thank you very much. And another question, David Sharma, renewables and investments in renewables. What will be the pace at Budimex of increasing your order book? Do you plan to acquire and commercialize projects, or maybe given the high energy prices, you want to keep the projects at the balance sheet and just use the profits from selling energy? Well, when it comes to the dynamics, this will depend on how effective we are when it comes to acquisitions. Right now, we've got ready to build projects. So the permit has been granted there, and depending on how quickly we can proceed there, we'll increase our order book. I hope that this will be very quick, but I cannot make any declarations here because there is a lot of competition between different companies which want to acquire new companies. So we'll see. We want to develop more sources of energy. We want to be an energy producer, and we want to secure that part of our business because we do not want to have an open selling position here. However, some part of our portfolio might be mixed in the future. So over 75% of energy with take-off guarantees and maybe some open parts as well. If we go even further, as an entity selling energy, we would also need to be responsible for striking a balance of energy supply, so we would need some open positions as well. But we would rather have our model with secured sales, so when we conclude a contract, a long-term contract for energy supplies with partners which have a good financial standing. And thanks to that, we'll be able to increase the scale, and the acquisitions will be financed, and also we'll be able to finance the construction of power plants in renewables with some banking leverage. at least 75%. So I think that our revenues will be secured. And just to add to what Mr. Węgłowski has said, we also have some greenfield projects. So these are projects in which we need to acquire a plot of land and then get the building permit, etc. And also please remember that we have our own plans within the group, so the colleagues working for Mostostal and FB Service can give you more information here. We hope to use our own energy for the needs of these plants. Why not? Thank you. Thank you for your answers. David Sharma has requested another comment on the tender, where there is a tender for trams going to the district of Wilanów in Warsaw. Do you believe that this contract can still be secured because the results have been annulled? It's very difficult for me to give you a precise answer here. We'll do our best to secure this contract. Indeed, the procedure has been annulled because one of the procedure was as follows. There was a price criterion of 95% and 5% was a criterion which related to the experience of the staff that we presented. And there were some doubts as to this criterion, so there was a conflict because we presented different contract managers and there were doubts with regard to their experience, and that's why the procedure was annulled, and there's going to be an auction now. So we'll see. So it's all because of that procedure before the National Chamber of Appeals. Mr. Buczek, the hedging policy with regard to the asphalt prices, what is the level to be expected there in 2022 and 2023? I think that question has been answered twice already today. Yes, indeed, this answer has already been answered before. And yet another question regarding the situation in Ukraine. Marcin, could you please give us some brief comments on our exposure to the Ukrainian and Russian markets, our direct exposure and indirect exposure when we consider our suppliers? There is zero exposure when it comes to the Ukrainian and Russian markets. We have zero activities there, and we have not purchased any materials from the Russian markets for years. So that exposure, that risk exposure for Budimex would be zero. Well, the labor market, there is some exposure there because we do not know now whether we'll have more people from Ukraine working in Poland or maybe fewer people from Ukraine working in Poland. Yes, indeed, this would be a factor to be considered. There are no other questions on my list for now. But there were some questions asked before, and one point has been raised. So annexing the contracts concluded already, increasing the value of contracts. So what is the situation like in this regard? And I think that also refers to the valorization clauses provided for in these contracts. I think that most contracts we have are flat rate contracts, so we have limited possibilities of annexing them to increase the value. However, many contracts are amended, especially in the private sector, and the value of contract is increased, or the project is subject to some changes. I cannot give you an exact figure as to how many annexes have been assigned, but this has no significant impact on our overall results. on the overall scale of our business.
Another question that we received relates to the situation in the railroad sector. What's the risk that Budimex margin will go down in 2023? Perhaps it's a typo. Perhaps it should have been 2022. The reason for that might be lack of highly profitable contracts in the railroad sector. Well, I would rather take look at the bigger picture, not only Budimex, but the entire railroad sector. Our portfolio is diversified. We are not only focused on the railroad sector. I would talk about high-volume buildings, the so-called cubature sector, road sector. So there is no fear that the margins of the entire company will go down. Our objective is to improve the margins and improve the profitability, to increase sales. We will do everything possible to achieve even greater profitability in the years to come. However, that will depend on the macro-scale conditions and the prices of materials, the situation in the world. However, I'm very positive looking at the scale of the 200 contracts that we are implementing currently. I can say that they have healthy structure. They have the valorization clause, hence I wouldn't see any risk of them impacting our margins negatively. To complement what my colleague said, our material backlog is 3.3 billion PLN in the railroad sector. In 2021, we haven't signed many contracts. However, the perspective of what is to come in 2022, i.e. over 10 billion PLN in value, with our market share of around 20%, is a beacon of hope that we will keep the backlog level pretty good, with a good profitability. Thank you very much. The next question relates to cash. Could you outline your cash scenario for 2022? How much can the company allocate for dividend, acquisitions and working capital, and how big a drop can you experience in your cash levels in 2022? When it comes to cash level at the end of 2022, we do not foresee any bigger changes. As for the working capital, we have reached the optimum level. On the one hand, we have quick payments from our investors, but on the other hand, we also have to pay our liabilities to our subcontractors quickly, so not much changes here. The cash position, as you see, is high. We have good profitability levels, so we see no contraindications against dividend payout. However, this is just a recommendation of the management board. No decision was passed up until now. So before the general shareholders meeting deciding about the dividend, we will make a formal recommendation when it comes to the dividend that was not paid out for 2021. However, you should also remember that we have high investment appetite. If our cash position was to go down, that would, in my opinion, only be possible if we allocated money for investments that should bring more profitability, more cash in the future. Thank you very much. A question that appeared here live, Katarzyna Smoczyńska, BNP Paribas. Why did you sell Budimex Nieruchomości? It was generating good profitability levels. So was it a result of negative valuation of the developer market in Poland, or perhaps the investment was a result of other conditions, other arguments? If yes, what were they? Well, this was a decision that was given great consideration. We see greater segments where we can develop, where we can achieve greater profitability. Of course, I mean here FB Service.
profitability levels can be greater than in the developer segment, but we can also enter new markets, and we can enter markets where we have to invest cash, as was said by my colleague, Mr. Węgłowski. We simply needed cash for such projects. That's why we decided to sell Budimex Nieruchomości. Thank you very much. David Sharma. What might be the level of investment outlays this year related to FB service, renewable energy sources, including Budimex SA? Well, I cannot make any declarations. In terms of FB service, we talk about minor in investment terms projects which will depend on the scale of renewables that we are able to acquire, whether that will be south of or north of 10 megawatt hours. However, we are looking at foreign markets to answer the question whether we want to develop organically or speed up that development via acquisitions. Today I cannot give you any specific figure nor a definite level. It's too early. Artur, could you add anything to that? Well, what I could add is that FB service is investing similar levels of capex every year in our facilities. We do that to start up new contracts. The level is around 50 million PLN. As was said by my colleague, all other investments related, for instance, to acquisition of other companies are hard to determine now. The entities that we have interest in acquiring should be possible to acquire through the company's means. We had a very good cash position at the end of the year, almost 880 million PLN at the end of 2021. We're trying to stay on that cash level so that we can finance all the investments that we are planning from our own funds. Thank you very much indeed. Another question, Maciej Wiewiórski, Bank Ochrony Środowiska. What was the amount received by Budimex in 2021 for contract indexation? What about indexing contracts of local government? Do we have a valorization clause there? And do you have a valorization clause in your contracts with private investors? I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to take that question. I cannot give you an exact figure when it comes to the contract valorization amount that we received. However, I can say that in the case of some contracts, we have already reached the cap of 5% of valorization. There are some contracts in which we are close to that cap, but I cannot give you a specific figure today. I'm sorry. So we will be able to answer that question at a later date. And as for local government investments, well, the situation is a bit worse here. Valorization provisions are very limited. There are conditions related to sale, production and other factors which significantly limits the possibility to valorize the contract. However, in the same vein as the Polish Road Authority and the railroad company came to the conclusion that it's necessary to valorize contracts, I believe that also local governments will come to the same conclusion. Another question that was also asked related to valorization provisions in contracts with private investors. Well, private investors are mostly investors from so-called cubature sector, representing high-volume buildings buildings. There we have practically no valorization clauses, but these are short-term contracts. Most of them last between 10 to 12 months, not more than 12 months, so valorization does not play such a great role. But that doesn't mean that we do not try to sit at a table with a private investor in order to valorize the contract. Indeed, there have been cases in the past when through dialogue we were able to receive more money for a contract already complemented on account of increase of material prices. Another question, the revenues of FB service is the objective of 1 billion for 2026 doable, and can it be reached more quickly? Well, my colleague, Mr. Popko, has already expressed that hope. I can only echo his words. 2026 is still far from now. We not only want to achieve that, we have a plan how to do it. And much will depend on our ability to pursue further acquisitions. As I already mentioned, we know how to reach that billion. I think that 650, 700 million will come from waste management. The other part will come from other areas of our activity. Waste management means greenfield that will only start generating significant profit and will scale up our activity only around 2025. But we can also acquire new companies, develop existing companies. That's what we are doing. That would bring us the effect more quickly. However, I cannot foresee us investing in very big and thus expensive entities. I can still see myself as a consolidator of the market. However, let's not forget that we are not far away from that. We've reached almost 800 million, and we do have a concept how to grow organically in the waste sector. We want to acquire commercial and industrial customers, not communal players. We are expecting over 100 million PLN over the coming 2 years from these two sectors of customers. So the billion level would be very possible before 2026. But we want to achieve that without decreasing our profitability level. Our role in the Budimex Group is that we should always have a slightly higher profitability level. That's our take on the question. And the last question from the analysts relating to the margin levels of contracts signed recently. We hear often that the contracts are very often signed on a level that is below the investor's budget. Some people say that that's a clear sign that the contractor will incur a loss then. Do you agree with that? Do you also observe that phenomenon? Yes, the price pressure resulting from lack of tenders in 2021 is huge. Our competitors are placing bids that allow the contract to be signed for as little as 70% of the budget of the investor. From our past experience, we can say that such a low level normally led to losses. However, there is a tremendous pressure when it comes to winning the tenders, winning the contracts, and that is not good for the contractors. That was the last question in the Q&A session. We have covered all questions, so we can conclude that part on the agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence at the summary of the financial results for 2021, and I do hope to see you during our next presentation. We will try to keep you up to date when it comes to our failures, achievements and challenges that are ahead of us. We do believe that 2022 will be an even better year, not only in terms of results, but also our sales levels and profitability, as well as diversification of our portfolio. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending this meeting. This goes on behalf of all the people present. Thank you once again for your attention.